Alright guys, continue on this N55 before startup. So we've hooked up the ISTA Plus. We've got to the main screen. We want to go through this and we want to clear all the fault codes. Alright guys, so we're back here. We're going to go ahead and calibrate the injectors, set the compensation flow. So we've got to get, remember we've got the number. We had documented the numbers on the box here, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So those numbers, those are our calibration number. We're going to go ahead and enter that into ISTA. All right, let's do a first start. Let's see how this is. All right, that's our first start. Engine sounds good. Before I run this up and I run it at a higher RPM, I'm going to go ahead and learn the Valvetronic limit positions. I'm going to do a first start and to try to do a stand-in break-in at idle to operating temperature. You guys recall we started the engine ran, not an issue. However, right after that, it really started to run rough, started to stutter, and eventually shut down. What of the messages that we were seeing on the display and the cluster is overheating. The oil temperature sensor gauge on the right side of the cluster, that's an oil sensor, that's an oil temperature sensor, not a coolant temperature sensor. That went like, where did that go to? That goes a little bit before 300 all the way to the right. That pegged all the way to the right. Info display says overheating. Cluster says overheating. Then the car went into limp mode. So when the engine computer senses you've got an overheating condition, it will go into limp mode and it will shut down the injectors to shut the engine down. So that happens here. So we haven't been able to get a good start, and I've been trying to figure out why the sensor, or why the DME or the error message for overheating when we're not, we're cold. Started to troubleshoot a little bit, pull the codes. When you go into limp mode, you get a slew of codes, a slew of misfires, a slew of injection shutdown. So there wasn't really a particular code. Other codes that was on there was the DMTL, I believe that's the tank leakage, fuel tank leakage detected. I haven't troubleshoot that yet, so but what we wanted to do was I wanted to check to see if the oil temperature sensor at the side of the block was good. So oil temperature sensor is located right here below the manifold. Okay, right, that sensor, this is what this sensor looks like. Okay, now this sensor has a standard resistant value in ambient temperature, maybe anywhere from 23 to 28 to 3000 ohms. As the temperature of the oil increases, the resistance decreases. Okay, so first thing you do, you know, everybody else, let's swap the sensor. Went ahead and swapped the sensor. No change. All the sensors, I've got 3 sensors here. They're all measured with the 2.3 to 2.8 kilo ohms. I also tested the sensor in a hot fluid. I've got a ultrasonic cleaner, and I've got this right now maybe 160, 150 degrees. So when I put the sensor in and I ohm test the resistance, it decreases, and all 3 of them decreases at the same rate. So I know I don't have a sensor problem. So do I have a harness problem? Right? So I unplugged the harness and I pinned out the harness to check for continuity between the sensor wiring and the plug. And the plug, the DME plug is the one, I believe is this one right here. So it's pin number 43 and 57 that goes to the oil temperature sensor. So we pinned that out. We've got good continuity. And I've also pinned out the other ones adjacent and all around to make sure that there's not a short to ground to the other ones. Same thing with, I did that both for the signal wire and the ground wire, and we're good. They don't have continuity to any other pins or to ground. So that's good. I mean, what's leading me right now is the DME, but I can't figure out why, because the engine now was running when I brought it in, you know. So that's kind of where we are right now. All right, so we went ahead and tried to learn the limit positions on the Valvetronic. Gave it a total of 3 attempts. However, it has failed. It sounds like the actuator motor is rotating, but the eccentric shaft is not making it all the way. So I'm not sure if it's that eccentric shaft is not good, or the motor, but it's recommendation here to replace motor, eccentric shaft, and spray nozzle. So we're gonna go ahead and take the valve cover off and have a look, and then replace those parts and try again. Okay. We were trying to do a actuator, do the learning stops for the actuator eccentric shaft to learn its stops, and then do after that a running phase process for the actuator and the eccentric motor, but would not allow me to go any further because it would not allow to be learned. The stops are not able to learn. You hear, as you guys can see, I put the video, or you guys will see on the if you look at the video, you'll see that the motor is clicking. It moves, but it clicks. So upon visual, I can see that one of the tooth is chipped. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, we'll go ahead and remove the eccentric shaft, remove the whole top assembly here, and replace the eccentric shaft, put another one back in, and then we'll try that again. Okay. Finally, she's running good. All right, so I don't want to break it in at idle, so let me shut it down. All right, guys, just a little quick update here. We've gone through all the diagnostic codes, and you're able to see all the steps that I went through from the initial start to all the diagnostic codes that came up on ISTA, and the engine running rough and shutting off, and injectors shutting off, and so forth. So we've gotten through all of that. We are where we've got our initial start. Engine is running, and before I can vary the RPMs for the braking procedure, I need to fill up the transmission. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm filling up the transmission, and ISTA calls for a process and a procedure to be able to do that. So right now I've got the oil plug off, and I'm adding oil as the temperature goes up. So my range for adding this oil is between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius. Right now I'm at 37. So engine is warming up, and while it's warming up, I'm trying to vary the idle between 1500 to 2500 to do a combination of the brake-in at the same time. We want to try to minimize idle as much as possible, but given the fact that the ISTA calls for idle to run the procedure, we're gonna have to do a blend and mix here. Okay, you guys can see there, all plugs off. And we are adding oil as we go. This typically takes about 7 quarts. Right now I'm on my 6 quart or 6 liter. It takes about 7 liter. You see? So we're full right there. We just gotta get the temperature up. And in between, putting it in reverse for 10 seconds, put it in the manual mode for M1 for 10 seconds, and manual mode for M2 for 10 seconds, and then in park, and then I vary the RPMs. Okay, so I've got the full 7 quarts of Lifeguard 8 fluid inside there. I'm gonna have to double check the capacity because this is not just a simple refill where you drain the oil from the transmission, replace the filter. It's what I did when I rebuilt the engine. I drained the converter, I drained the oil cooler, so I may need to add a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that now. I've got my 7 quarts. I'm going to let it cool down and then recheck it from the original process of checking the transmission oil. But for now, let's continue with our break-in. What I'm doing here at idle, well, before I do my road test to break in the engine, there's a standing after you start it to vary your RPMs from 25% to 35%. And after this reach operating temperature, we're going to drain the oil and put new break-in oil inside. .535xi engine swap from the rebuilt engine. You guys recall this engine was rebuilt under the 1227701. There's a whole playlist of how the engine was rebuilt. So the engine was rebuilt. We installed it into the N55. Remember we installed it into the 535xi. Remember, this 535xi had an engine knock that started knocking with me in the Chicago highway. You guys can take a link. I'll put a link to that video, show you how the engine was knocking and took it apart and so forth. But this is a swap where we rebuild the engine. Everything is in. Initial startup, we had many codes, Vanos, solenoids, overheating, sensors. It was just a slew of stuff. We got past diagnosing those things and fixing them. We had break-in oil, a mixture of half break-in oil and half conventional oil, and the first part of the break-in procedure is to run it up to operating temperature without driving the car. So we've done that. The engine is hot, we just shut it off. We're going to go ahead and drain the oil, and then after that we're going to refill it back with break-in oil. The next part of this is to do a road test and drive it for the next 400 or 500 miles, varying engine loads and so forth, not really highway but off highway, and get this ring properly seated against cylinder wall with the break-in oil. And then after that we'll change it out and put the synthetic in. Alright, so let's get the oil drained and see what that looks like. Alright, so we just drained the initial oil, mixture of half break-in oil and half conventional oil, and this is just a run. Initial start, no driving, just getting the engine up to operating temperature. So the purpose of this is to flush all contaminants out of the engine, all your assembly lube. You recall on this engine we had several different type of assembly lubes, you know, transmission oil on the lifters, liquid moly on the lobes of the crankshaft, on red line, among all the other areas when we're assembling. And then recall whatever dust or contaminants gets in the engine, and then the block in all those oil ports that you really can't fully get all that contaminants out even when you wash the block. This oil is serve as the flushing mechanism for all of that to get the initial. We got it up to operating temperature and we ran it, so this oil is still hot. This oil is 175 degrees right now, and engine's been stopped running for maybe half hour. So we got this up, according to the temp, we got up 250 degrees Fahrenheit on the oil temp. So this is why we want to flush the oil. So we've got this flushed. Now we're going to go ahead and add new break-in oil. So we've got 7 quarts of BR30 break-in oil. This has got about a 2500 parts per million of ZDDP. It's the mechanism that allows the break-in of the rings against the cylinder wall. So we're going to add this oil in, and then we're going to drive this vehicle for about 500 miles with varying the load across the engine. So on the initial road test, we're going to vary the load from 25% to 75%. So anywhere from 2500 RPM to maybe 6000 RPM. And then we're going to come off and let the engine brake itself. That allow for to push that cylinder rings against the wall. Okay, so let's get this done, and we'll go from there. We're going to pressurize the engine. When I say pressurize, we're going to drive the car, and we're not going to baby it. We're going to fluctuating anywhere from 25% of the RPM of torque to 75%. So I think that's right around 6000 RPM. So we're going to accelerate up to 6000 RPM and then come off the throttle and allow the engine to brake itself. So you're allowing the pressure that's within the block to expand those piston rings out against the bore, so you can bed the rings into the cylinder bore. We've got the break-in oil in here, so we're going to do that for 20-30 minutes to get this well bedded in. And once we do that, we're going to drive this for a little bit longer. I haven't decided yet how long I'm going to keep the break-in oil in here. Maybe I'll keep it up to 100 miles or so. After that, switch it back to synthetics, but that's an update for you guys. We are going to start our road test break-in procedure, and we are going to run it for 20 to 30 minutes, and we're going to run it right between 1500 RPMs to 5500 RPMs. We're going to accelerate all the way up to 5500 RPM, come off the gas, the throttle, close the throttle, and let the engine brake itself to 1500 RPMs, and then we're going to do that again, repeat that for 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, I don't have a way of holding this camera, so I'll try to give you guys a little update as we go along. Okay, all right guys, here's a 400 miles update on the engine. We are right now on 400 miles on the break-in oil. We're going ahead and change our break-in oil, remove it, change the filter. We're going to inspect the oil, we're going to inspect the filter, and then we're going to go right now with the synthetic oil. Car's been running pretty good, I must say. It's running. There seems to be like a ghost code, a code that comes up, but it doesn't illuminate check engine light or anything like that. I'm getting a the intake camshaft not locking up. I've gone through a diagnosis. I'm gonna change the oil and run it and see if it keeps coming back. But right now it's not affecting functionality or running the engine, or no rough idle or anything like that. And it only happens, you know, maybe a course of 400 miles it occurs 2 times. So not sure about that one there. All right guys, so here's a filter from the running of the engine 400 miles with break-in oil. Let's take a look, see what this looks like. Do have some shiny aluminum pieces in here. Remember, this filter, I didn't change this filter after the initial startup, so this has been the filter from the initial startup all the way to 400 miles. So initial startup probably have some aluminum, that some wear from the aluminum heads or the camshaft area. See, we got some aluminum pieces there. Okay. Some minor aluminum shavings here. Could just be because of the break-in of the oil that's breaking in the engine, but I didn't expect to see all of this. Okay. Okay. Didn't expect this much of aluminum in here, so I'm gonna have to run this again to the next oil change and see how it looks, and we'll go from there. Okay. All right, guys. So first oil change, getting out the break-in oil and putting in the liquid moly 5W30. This is going to we're gonna run our oil change interval at 7,500 miles. So next update, next oil change 7,500 miles, and see how it's going. Okay. Leave me a comment, guys. Thank you.